comment giving a score from 0 to 10. For my story, your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The biting wind of the great industrial metropolis whipped through the abandoned buildings, carrying the acrid scent of smoke and despair. Among the wreckage of a construction site that once housed dreams, the 4-year-old orphan boy rummaged through the debris with small, bruised fingers, searching for anything to alleviate the hunger that had gnawed at his stomach for 3 days. His fragile, malnourished appearance made him seem even smaller, as if the world had sucked all the childhood out of his skeletal frame. The sound of rain began to intensify when he heard something different amidst the usual street noises. A faint cry, almost inaudible, came from a pile of rubble near the overflowing sewer, swollen with the storm. The boy approached slowly, fearing he would find some injured animal or worse. But when he moved aside the pieces of concrete and trash, his eyes widened in surprise and horror. There lay a baby of only a few months old, wrapped in a blanket that had once been luxurious, but was now soaked and soiled. The child was crying, with an intensity that seemed to drain all the energy from its small body, its lips blue with cold, and its little arms moving desperately. The orphan boy had never seen anything so small and helpless, and something inside his chest, tightened by hunger, stirred in a way he couldn't understand. Without thinking twice, he picked up the baby in his arms, trying to shield it from the rain that was beginning to fall harder. The weight of the child surprised him, but a determination he didn't know he possessed took over his movements. He ran through the deserted streets towards his refuge, an old, abandoned factory where he had created a small shelter among rusty machines and pieces of tarpaulin. As he ran, he didn't notice that a black Lincoln town car had stopped on the nearby corner. Inside the luxurious vehicle, the 30-year-old millionaire businesswoman observed the scene with an expression that mixed surprise and something she herself couldn't define. Her perfectly styled hair framed a face of striking beauty, but her cold eyes, accustomed to calculating profits and losses, fixed on that starving boy carrying a baby as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. The woman had just left a meeting where she had laid off 50 employees without batting an eye, significantly increasing her company's dividends. Her fortune, built through aggressive investments on Wall Street and cryptocurrency ventures, had made her one of the wealthiest people in the city, but something about that scene made her hesitate before ordering the driver to move on. For the next 3 days, the boy tried to care for the baby with the few resources he had. He tore pieces of his own clothes to make makeshift diapers and tried to feed the child with dirty water and pieces of soaked bread that he could find. The baby continued to cry constantly, and the boy felt a growing despair as he realized he didn't know how to help. The hunger that had always been his companion now became an even greater torment as he began to share the little food he found with the baby, even knowing that it wasn't suitable for such a small child. His hands trembled with weakness as he tried to rock the baby to sleep, humming fragmented melodies that he vaguely remembered from his own mother. The millionaire returned to the same location in the following days, always in the late afternoon, observing from afar the boy's desperate movements. She had cancelled 3 important meetings to be there, something she had never done in her career. Her assistants began to question her absences, but she couldn't explain even to herself what attracted her to that situation. On the 4th night, during a violent storm that hit the city, the boy's makeshift shelter was partially destroyed by a piece of roof that collapsed. The boy managed to protect the baby with his own body, but ended up injured in his left arm. The pain was intense, but he couldn't stop moving as the rain poured in from all sides and the baby was getting colder and colder. It was then that the millionaire made a decision that she herself couldn't understand. She stepped out of the Lincoln Town car for the first time in weeks without a business destination, stepped into the mud of the streets she had always avoided, and walked towards the boy who was struggling to keep the baby warm. When the boy saw her approaching, his eyes filled with terror, and he hugged the baby tighter, thinking that this elegant woman had come to separate them. The rain continued to fall torrentially, and they both looked at each other in silence for a moment that seemed eternal. The millionaire, with her expensive clothes completely soaked, held out her hand, offering a dry blanket that she had taken from her car. The boy recoiled, suspicious, but the baby was shaking so much that he knew he needed to accept help, even if it meant taking risks he couldn't calculate. The boy held the blanket offered by the elegant woman, but kept his distance, his small eyes shining with distrust and fear. The baby in his arms had stopped crying momentarily, as if feeling the tension in the air. The millionaire realized that any sudden movement could make the boy run away, so she stood still in the rain, letting him make the decision. Slowly, the boy wrapped the baby in the dry blanket, and for the first time in days, the child seemed to relax. The woman watched as the boy's small, bruised fingers worked with extreme care, as if that baby were made of crystal. She murmured a few reassuring words, keeping her voice low and non-threatening. During the following weeks, the millionaire established a peculiar routine. Every day, in the late afternoon, she appeared in the area near the boy's shelter, always bringing supplies that she left at a safe distance: formula, diapers, clean blankets, basic medicines. She never got too close, respecting the boy's space, who remained extremely cautious. The boy initially distrusted every item left behind. He even threw away the first foods, fearing they were poisoned or that it was a trap to capture them. But when the baby developed a high fever during a particularly cold night, he had no choice but to use the medicines that the woman had left. To his surprise and relief, the baby improved. Gradually, a silent communication developed between them. The millionaire began to leave small notes, along with the supplies, written in simple lettering, explaining how to use each item to care for the baby. The boy, who had learned to read a few basic words before losing his parents, could understand the simplest instructions. The care routine that the boy had created impressed even the woman accustomed to managing large businesses. He had established times to feed the baby, moments to change the makeshift diapers, and even created a more protected area inside the shelter where the child could rest without being disturbed by the wind and constant humidity. During this period, the millionaire began to discreetly investigate the origin of the baby. Using her contacts and financial resources, she discovered that the child belonged to her biggest business rival, an equally wealthy woman who had disappeared from the city after a scandal involving fraud in her financial investments. The discovery left her disturbed, as it meant that this baby was the heir to a considerable fortune. Meanwhile, the boy began to develop a deep bond with the baby. He talked to the child for hours, telling stories he invented about distant places where there was always food and where it was never cold. The baby responded with smiles and babbles, creating a connection that warmed the boy's heart even on the coldest days. The millionaire watched these interactions from afar, feeling something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Her own childhood had been spent in expensive boarding schools, surrounded by luxury but empty of genuine affection. Seeing that starving boy show so much love and dedication awakened painful memories that she preferred to keep buried. One day, the boy became seriously ill. The millionaire found him passed out near the baby, who was crying desperately. For the first time, she broke her rule of keeping her distance and approached directly. The boy had a high fever and was delirious, mumbling names she couldn't understand. The baby was hungry and dirty, clearly needing immediate care. The woman faced a dilemma that tested all her principles. She could take the baby away and ensure that he had all the necessary medical care, but that would mean separating the two children who had become inseparable. Or she could try to help the boy as well, risking exposing her growing involvement with that situation. She chose the second option and took both to a discreet private clinic, paying generously for the professional's discretion. During the 3 days that the boy was hospitalized, recovering from severe malnutrition and pneumonia, she personally cared for the baby, discovering a patience and tenderness that she didn't know she possessed. When the boy woke up and found the baby clean, well-fed and smiling in his arms, his eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he looked directly at the millionaire and murmured an almost inaudible, "Thank you." At that moment, she realized that her life had changed irreversibly. Back at the shelter, now discreetly renovated by the millionaire with more resistant materials, the boy began to accept her closer presence. She started visiting daily, sometimes staying for hours talking to him about simple things: the weather, the baby's needs, small improvements they could make to the shelter. But the situation became complicated when other homeless people began to notice the constant presence of the rich woman in the area. Some approached asking for money, others made malicious comments about her intentions. The boy became increasingly tense, fearing that all that attention could attract trouble for him and the baby. The tension reached its peak when a group of young delinquents decided that the boy was hiding money given by the elegant woman. They surrounded him one afternoon, demanding that he hand over everything he had received from her. The boy, protecting the baby against his chest, denied having any money, but they didn't believe him. The situation was escalating dangerously when the millionaire arrived and found the boy cornered, with the baby crying scared in his arms. The millionaire positioned herself between the young delinquents and the boy, her imposing presence creating a moment of hesitation in the group. She spoke in a firm but controlled voice, explaining that there was no money involved and that they should look elsewhere for their business. The young people, intimidated by the woman's confidence and her clearly wealthy appearance, retreated, mumbling threats, but the leader of the group cast a warning look that promised that this situation was not over. After the confrontation, the boy was visibly shaken. His hands trembled as he rocked the baby, and he constantly looked over his shoulder as if expecting the young people to return at any moment. The millionaire realized that her regular presence had created a problem that put the children in danger, and that tormented her all night. The next day, she made a drastic decision. She offered the boy the possibility of moving to a safer location, a small house that she owned on the outskirts of the city, away from prying eyes and constant threats. The boy, however, immediately rejected the offer. That makeshift shelter was the only home he knew, and the idea of leaving the place where he felt relatively safe terrified him. During the following weeks, the tension gradually increased. The young delinquents returned several times, always when the millionaire was not present, intimidating the boy and demanding protection money. The boy began to hide the baby in increasingly precarious places, constantly changing hiding places to avoid direct confrontations. The situation worsened when the baby fell ill again, this time with a severe intestinal infection caused by the unsanitary conditions in which they were forced to live, constantly on the run. The boy, desperate and not knowing what to do, finally accepted that he needed the millionaire's help more than ever. When she arrived for her daily visit, she found the boy crying over the baby, who was groaning with pain and fever. Once again, she took both to the private clinic, but this time the doctor seriously warned her about the conditions in which the children were living. He explained that the baby needed constant care and a clean environment, otherwise he could develop serious complications. The boy listened to the entire conversation, and for the first time began to question whether his love for the baby was enough to protect him. During the baby's recovery in the clinic, the millionaire and the boy spent more time together than ever. She began to tell stories of her own childhood, revealing how lonely she felt, even surrounded by wealth and employees. The boy, in turn, shared fragmented memories of his parents and the few happy moments he could remember before the accident. It was during one of these conversations that the millionaire discovered something devastating. The boy casually mentioned the name of the company where his father worked before losing his life in the industrial accident. It was one of the subsidiaries of her own corporation, a factory where she had consciously reduced investments in safety to maximize profits and increase the return on her stock market shares. The revelation hit her like a punch in the stomach. She perfectly remembered the decision she had made 2 years earlier, cutting funds allocated to the maintenance of safety equipment to increase her quarterly dividends. The accident that killed the boy's father had been a direct consequence of this decision, as was the helpless situation in which the child found himself. Overcome with guilt, she tried to process this information without the boy noticing her distress. But during the following nights, she could barely sleep, haunted by the knowledge that her greed had created the tragedy that destroyed the life of that innocent boy. Her wealth, built through ruthless business decisions, suddenly seemed stained with blood. Meanwhile, the baby's recovery progressed well, but the boy was increasingly distressed about returning to the shelter. He had sensed that the millionaire was different, more distant and thoughtful, and began to fear that she would abandon them. The idea of losing the only adult who had shown genuine care for them terrified him almost as much as going back to the dangerous streets. The millionaire, struggling with her growing guilt, began to make impulsive decisions. She drastically increased the amount she spent on medical care for the baby, bought expensive equipment to make the shelter more comfortable, and began to visit multiple times a day. The boy, confused by these sudden changes, didn't know how to interpret her behavior. The situation reached a breaking point when the young delinquents, angered by the continued protection the children received, decided to take more drastic measures. They began to spread rumors throughout the neighborhood that the rich woman was involved in suspicious activities with children, trying to create legal problems for her and force her to step away. When the millionaire heard about the rumors, she realized that her presence was putting the children at risk in ways she hadn't foreseen. The authorities could investigate the situation and separate the boy from the baby, placing both in different foster homes. The possibility of seeing those two children, who had become the center of her world, being separated completely despaired her. It was then that she made the most difficult decision of her life. She revealed to the boy the truth about her connection to their situation, confessing that her company had been responsible for the situation that left them helpless. She spoke about her guilt, about how her business decisions had cost human lives, and about how finding them had changed her perspective on everything. The boy listened to everything in silence, holding the baby against his chest. When she finished speaking, he looked her in the eyes, and with a wisdom that was surprising for his age, said that he already suspected that there was something more behind all that help. But he also said that he saw how she genuinely cared about them now, and that was more important than anything that had happened in the past. That night, while the baby slept peacefully, the millionaire and the boy made plans to face the challenges ahead together, unaware that an even more shocking discovery awaited them. The discovery that would change everything came through an unexpected call. The private investigator that the millionaire had hired to research the baby's origin called with information that she wasn't prepared to hear. The baby wasn't the child of her business rival, as she had believed. The forged documents she had initially found were part of an elaborate scheme to hide the child's true identity. The baby was, in fact, the child of an employee of her own company who had lost her life in the same industrial accident that killed the boy's father. The woman, a young safety engineer of just 25 years old, had repeatedly tried to warn about the risks of the factory's precarious conditions, but her reports were ignored by supervisors who prioritized production deadlines and cost reduction. The revelation that 2 families had been destroyed by her business decisions hit the millionaire with a devastating force. She realized that she had spent months caring for the two orphan children created by her own greed and negligence. The weight of responsibility for their destroyed lives became almost unbearable, but it also gave her a painful clarity about what she needed to do. During the following days, she struggled with the decision to reveal this new information to the boy. How could she explain that both he and the baby he loved as a brother were victims of the same ruthless business choices? How could she look into the eyes of that courageous child and admit that she had destroyed not one, but two families? Meanwhile, the external pressure continued to increase. The rumors spread by the young delinquents had reached the ears of social workers, who began to ask questions about the children's irregular situation. The millionaire knew that it was only a matter of time before the authorities officially intervened, and she couldn't allow the boy and the baby to be separated by the system. It was then that she made the most radical decision of her professional life. She called an emergency meeting with the board of directors of her company and announced her intention to liquidate a large part of her business assets. Her partners were stunned when she revealed that she intended to use a significant portion of her personal fortune to create a fund for the families of the victims of the industrial accident. The reaction was immediate and furious. The other shareholders accused her of being mentally unstable, arguing that she was destroying years of work for a temporary emotional outburst. Some people tried to question her about the rumors of her involvement with street children, insinuating that she was being blackmailed or manipulated. But the millionaire remained firm in her decision. She had calculated exactly how much money she would need to secure the future of the two children and create a suitable home for them. The remainder of her fortune, built on investments in stocks and applications in digital assets, would be redirected to compensate all the families harmed by her past business decisions. When she finally revealed the whole truth to the boy, including the baby's real origin, he was silent for a long time. She expected anger, rejection, or at least justified accusations. Instead, the boy looked at the baby sleeping in his arms and said something that surprised her completely. He had always felt that they were connected in a special way, and now he understood why. The boy then asked a question that left her speechless. He wanted to know if she really cared about them, or if all that help was just a way to alleviate her guilt. The brutal honesty of the question forced her to examine her own motivations more deeply than she ever had. After a long reflection, she admitted that she had started helping out of guilt, but that over the months they had become genuinely important to her. She confessed that caring for them had taught her about unconditional love in a way that her life of luxury and business success had never managed. They had become her real family, more true than any relationship she had had before. The final decision came when the social workers finally appeared to investigate the situation. The millionaire was prepared with all the necessary legal documentation, including adoption papers that she had begun processing weeks before. She had transformed her mansion into a suitable home for children, hired specialized caregivers, and ensured that both the boy and the baby would have access to the best education and medical care available. When the social service employees visited the property and saw the exceptional conditions she had created, as well as the genuine bond between her and the children, they quickly approved the adoption procedures. The boy, who had spent years fearing being separated from the baby, finally had the legal guarantee that they would remain together forever. The transition to the new life was not without challenges. The boy needed time to adapt to the abundance after years of scarcity, and sometimes still woke up in the middle of the night, checking if the baby was safe. The millionaire, in turn, had to learn to be a mother, something for which her privileged education had not prepared her. But as the months passed, they became a true family. The boy began to attend school and demonstrated an exceptional intelligence that had been suppressed by the struggle for survival. The baby grew healthy and happy, developing a cheerful personality that illuminated the entire house. The millionaire discovered that the happiness she felt seeing them grow and thrive was more satisfying than any financial success she had achieved. She kept her promise to compensate the other families affected by the accident, establishing a permanent fund to ensure education and medical care for all the children orphaned by the tragedy. Although her personal fortune had decreased significantly, she discovered that she had much more than money could buy. Years later, when the boy became a bright young adult and the baby grew to be a curious and caring child, they still gathered every night for family dinner. The woman, who was once a cold and calculating businesswoman, had transformed into a dedicated mother who found her true purpose not in the accumulation of wealth, but in the unconditional love she shared with her two children saved from the streets. The family that was born from suffering and guilt had blossomed into forgiveness and hope, proving that even the most serious mistakes can be transformed into opportunities for redemption and genuine love.